Welcome to Stop My Crisis. I'm your host, Vivian Gaspar, and we're here today to help protect our kids. We need to remember that sexual harassment isn't just what we were talking about in the news for the presidential election, what Donald Trump was accused of doing. Unfortunately, it is a bigger and growing problem on college campuses throughout the United States. And we're very fortunate to have with us today here Joseph Morano, who currently serves as a Senior Director of Faculty Relations and Title IX Coordinator for the Culinary Institute of America's 4 college campuses. He also received his law degree from Brooklyn Law School and his bachelor's degree from Syracuse University. He is a certified professional in human resources from the Human Resources Certification Institute and is also certified as a Title IX coordinator from the Association of Title IX Administrators. Welcome, Joe. And my goodness, you have so many different qualifications. We're just really fortunate because I want parents to be aware. Part of our mission here at Stop My Crisis is to raise awareness. So tell us first, what is a Title IX coordinator?
And the big question is, what is Title IX?
That is the first place to start.
The Roman numeral IX, people see. For anybody who reads the news, which most people do, you've seen cases in colleges over the last couple of years talking about Title IX and referring to sexual harassment, sexual assault, which is a big focus everywhere, but on college campuses specifically. So it's nothing new, and the law goes back to 1972. So way back, and the original law was drafted just to prevent sexual harassment on college campuses, but also equity in athletics. Most people remember there should be as many women's teams as men's teams. Part of that law was to prevent sex discrimination on college campuses, and that includes K-12 school districts and anybody who receives federal funding, private or public. So it covers a large group. So it's only in the last few years that this has really come to the forefront. Separate states, New York, California, have added additional laws to strengthen that up. But it's always been a concern on college campuses. Now with the media focusing on these things, we have an opportunity to talk a little bit more about it and make sure that students and parents can be guided accordingly when they choose a college.
And this is a federal law, right? This is not state by state.
This is a federal law. Each state will have an additional law attached to it. New York has the yes means yes law, as does California. And there's other consequences to sexual harassment and assault, but generally, wherever you are in the United States, Title IX applies. Okay,
so you had mentioned that this is for universities. Is Title IX specific for colleges and universities, or does it protect everyone in an educational system from kindergarten on up?
It does. Everything from K-12 through college.
Does that also apply to private schools or just public schools or publicly funded?
Anybody who receives public funding. So it's also private schools.
Okay, because some private schools don't receive public funding.
Well, some do, and that's the thing.
What if they don't? Is there any exemption?
Well, the exemption would be other laws that you could apply if there's any harassment or misconduct in the workplace.
For those who pay really generous amounts of money to a private education, I would hate to think that just because it's a private education, they could be susceptible and not face any retaliation for being a perpetrator or, unfortunately, if you're a victim.
There's other federal laws that would apply, but most, despite the misnomer of private schools, many private schools do accept public funding, everything from transportation to books.
Okay, so if they have transportation and they accept that,
if they get any federal funding, Title IX will rule the day. Absolutely.
Okay, great. I want to make sure everyone has some type of protection, so that's really useful to know. So now for all the parents that are sending their kids off to university, and of course, as we know, all levels of education, what are the ramifications? Can you give some examples of what it protects and what can happen if someone's found guilty of one of these crimes that they're committing? Because people forget they're actually crimes. Just because it might be committed by another teenager, if you will, against someone, they think that they're a teenager. Just because they're younger, they could be immune to it.
Yeah, and actually just to separate crimes from Title IX offenses. So for instance, my jurisdiction on a college campus would be to things that happen on the campus and keeping the campus safe in my role as Title IX coordinator, as all other Title IX coordinators do. But, you know, there's also criminal ramifications. So a sexual assault may be criminal, it may not be. But in our world, in the Title IX world, it could be sexual assault, discrimination, dating violence, domestic violence, stalking. Those are all the things that are covered by federal law, which include one of the other laws, the Clery law.
Okay,
which most people you may have heard of.
Please tell us, what is the Jean Clery law?
Jean Clery was a student back in 1986 who unfortunately was raped and killed in her dormitory at Lehigh University. So her parents vigilantly fought, and now there's a law that every parent and every student can check the crime statistics of every college campus.
This law, this from Jean Clery, was she raped and killed by another student, or did someone break in?
No, it was a fellow student in a dormitory, and apparently Lehigh had had similar issues before, so the parents felt that, you know, they should have known. So now, if you look at the Culinary Institute of America website or any other college website, you will see the Clery Report that's there, annual security report, so you can see how many sexual assaults were reported on that campus, any domestic violence that was reported, and you could see the statistics as a parent. Like, we as parents look at everything else that a college has to offer, right?
So is this mandated to be updated by every university and college? Is it quarterly? How frequently is the update
Depends on
mandatory?
the state. It's at least every 2 years.
Wow, so that's not very accurate information if it's 2 years.
Well, for instance, in New York, we do it every year.
Okay.
So, for instance, the Culinary Institute of America, we've chosen, it actually could be every 2 years. We do it every year, and we think it's helpful for that to now. I'm talking about two different reports here, so I apologize. The Clery Report is every year.
I see, okay.
That's required. But the Campus Climate Survey, which is also very important, shows how the students feel about anything that may have occurred. And those are the kind of questions that we ask. Has there been a sexual assault? How you feel? Have you been assaulted? Did you know who to go to? Who did you tell? A lot of times you get, well, I told my friends. And there's percentages. Some people will say, well, I went to my administrator, I went to my professor, I went to the Title IX coordinator, which is what I do. And sometimes they don't tell anybody.
So what happens if they at first are so afraid or shocked or just in a state that they don't feel comfortable coming forward? Is there statute of limitations?
Not really. On our campus, it just gets harder to investigate. Criminally, it could continue on. Someone could report something a year later, 2 years later, and they have the right to do that. On our campus, we encourage all students, they can go to counseling. We encourage them to go to confidential counseling. So that necessarily doesn't mean that I would know about it, but the counselor might encourage them to come forward, county counselors as well. A part of it, our role is to, the moment we know about it, to keep the campus safe, which could be to remove any possible threat on the campus, to make sure the young lady or young man is safe and that they get any support that they need. And once we know about it, that we can separate if there's two parties from classes, from dorms.
Well, so that's because our next question is going to be, what if, let's say there's an investigation, and because there wasn't enough substantial evidence, it goes down to, unfortunately, a he said, she said, to be very classic. And what if there just wasn't enough evidence to convict or to say that it was a real situation? What happens? Is that person forced to now continue to see that person on campus, you know, the perpetrator or alleged perpetrator, or do they have to go to classes with them? Is there any way to help protect them if they're not found that they were truly a victim in the eyes of who did the investigation, such as yourself or whoever else would be the investigator in the situation?
Well, we have, for instance, I oversee all our investigations. Our investigators are highly trained, and I've been an investigator for years before I took on the Title IX coordinator job. One of the challenges always is, and it's a lower standard of proof, and I think people don't understand that. Everybody knows law and order. Right?
Yes, of course.
Okay, what's the criminal standard of proof? Beyond a reasonable doubt.
Right, of course.
This is not that standard. This is a preponderance of the evidence, which is basically 50% plus one, or more likely than not. So we get to look at these things from a standpoint of more likely that this happened or didn't happen. And so for investigations, we tend to find that some of these things happen, harassment, assault. But one of the challenges is, during the investigation, keeping people apart. And at the end, even if we don't find that there was a sexual assault, we may have found sexual harassment. We try to separate the students.
You still separate because
we try to take care of everybody. And you also have to keep in mind, when there's a complaint, an investigation, you don't know whether the person who's the respondent actually did it.
Right. So then, are you being fair to, and let's be a devil's advocate, if they were found that there wasn't enough evidence, would there be a concern with keeping somebody who had crimes alleged against them out of their classes? Because what if they took classes, or at least one class, with the alleged victim? Now, couldn't that be a false reporting? Now you would be hurting somebody who could be falsely reported against. They'd have to be removed from classes or their dormitory. How do you make sure everybody's treated equally?
We do our best, and that's part of my job, that the process is followed fairly, equally, that we examine it. There's several steps. So there's an investigator who investigates the matter. I review it. The student or whoever's involved, it could be an employee, gets to appeal it to a hearing officer, and then if they're unhappy, they go to an appeals officer. So there's several levels of it. While the case goes on, though, it really has to do with the best evidence we can get. One of the challenges is really getting people to speak up, just like in any other investigation.
Right,
luckily for us, and it's myself, other fellow Title IX coordinators, today's students put everything in writing using their cell phone, pictures, so there's a lot more evidence, not necessarily determinative that something occurred, but you can get a sense for what was happening before and what was happening after. And it makes it a little less challenging, but it's challenging to try to, for all of us, to keep the process fair. Because everybody has rights. The person who is accused has rights. Right. And, you know, depending on the state, New York State, we have to make sure we read them their rights of that they have a right to a fair investigation and be treated fairly. And the same thing goes with, obviously, the person who may be the victim. Okay. And in the beginning, we treat everybody with respect and try to take care of whatever issues are out there. But in the end, we do our best to come up with a fair and equitable solution. And sometimes that means expelling a student.
Right, so I was going to say is, what would the punishment be?
Oh, the punishment could be expulsion, suspension, long-term suspension, which means you can't come back to our program for, you know, a year and a half. In the most extreme cases, we've had expulsions. And not only that, while our investigation goes on, if it's a criminal conduct and the individual wants to report with law enforcement, we work with our local law enforcement very well, there can be criminal charges. So we've had someone, you know, go that route as well. But in the end, our job is to keep the campus safe. So expulsion is pretty serious. In New York State, to give you an example, there's a special law, and some of the states are considering it. If you're found to be guilty of sexual assault on a college campus in New York State, it goes on your transcript.
Oh, that's really good. So it'd be difficult to transfer to another school.
Correct. It would be noted that that's what occurred. Some people, and both sides are arguing, wow, that's really severe, and someone made a mistake. But sexual assault is a serious.
It is serious. But here's my concern. We're fortunate to have a guest on our show who is a college professor. And what she talked about as a professor of public health is that, unfortunately, 20% of college male students have confessed, they've actually confessed, to deliberately plying females with alcohol to coerce them for sex. And they've actually admitted it. So therefore, is there ongoing mandatory seminars? Is there ongoing education to remind, unfortunately, 1 in 5 or what 20% is very big numbers, what are the ramifications that they shouldn't do this so we can get those numbers down? It would be wonderful they could be eradicated, but to think that 1 in 5 guys is admitting to do that, and really that's rape, because if you're giving a female enough alcohol or any alcohol where they have impaired judgment, that is rape.
Well, it's a serious concern, and part of my job as Title IX coordinator, as all the other Title IX coordinators across the country, is education and prevention. It starts with day one, educating the students in orientation, letting them know that there's all these different things out there, which includes the law.
Right.
In New York, we have the affirmative consent law, which is a little special. California has it too.
What is affirmative consent? Spell this the law.
Yes means yes.
Want to know.
And everybody knows no means no. If you say no, okay,
but
great,
what
it means no.
If you don't say no?
Well, that's why affirmative consent takes it another step forward, where you need to say yes.
Okay, so people, and you're in a romantic situation. Let's say it's a date rape situation, but before you're getting raped, it's a date. So you're perhaps, you know, starting to get very comfortable with somebody after dinner or what have you. People don't really say, can I do this or can I do that? And you're waiting for a yes. Does it always have to be a verbal yes? Because that can get a little awkward.
Well, it depends.
So what does it mean?
It depends on the state. New York, the term we use are words or actions. So if you're kissing somebody and they kiss you back, I suppose that's consent in that area. As you go along, there's very many steps in a tryst, we'll call it, for lack of a word. We use terms of back in the old days, making out, however you would like to use that term, of consent. So, okay, we're kissing, and that's great. We both agree that we're kissing, but then we move farther than that. Just because you're kissing doesn't necessarily mean you want to have sex.
Right.
During the process, if there's alcohol or drugs, the question then becomes, how do you deal with, well, did I give did this person give me consent or not if I'm the male? And you have to be very careful. And if you're the young lady, you also have to be very careful. Can you give consent if you're passed out? The answer is no, absolutely not.
How is someone who's unconscious give consent at all?
If I'm blackout drunk but I'm still functioning becomes a little bit of a challenge. But we look at these things, and this is what young ladies have to really understand, and young men as well. Just because you started out being okay with something doesn't mean that you're okay with everything. And you have the right to withdraw your consent. You have the right to say, you know what, I don't want to do that.
But what about if you're in any kind of relationship, or this is a multiple date situation, and let's say you gave consent previously where you wanted to be intimate, but does that mean that let's be stereotypical for just a second and say that now the man can think, or the male can think that, oh, that means that since we had sex before, that means she'll always want to have sex. How does that figure into your investigations?
It does, but it doesn't. At the same time, you can always, just because two parties had sex 3 times, 10 times, 15 times, or in a dating relationship, doesn't mean that next time can't be sexual assault. It's all about consent. So you can change your mind. Just because everybody thought it was okay last week, last month, last year, things change. And a young lady or a young man can say, no, I don't want to do it. There's no guarantee. Is it dispositive of that there was a relationship? Yes. Was there something different about this last time? Well, I said no, and he continued on. We look at those things. Everything is date by date, relationship by relationship, and minute by minute, which is, I was okay. I have my clothes off, and then I decided that, no, I don't want to do it. And it's okay to say no.
Then you talk about this in the training with...
We do. We talk about it with students, especially. And, you know, the addition of drugs and alcohol into this conduct is always a challenge. While, you know, we can have a conversation here and we're sober and we're talking, in that environment, we remind them about staying safe and thinking about what they're doing and knowing what the consequences are, not just because of what the law says, but putting yourself in a position where you no longer control what you're doing, or you're not in the best position to know what's going on.
Now, it's also really important, I think, is to help your friends stay safe. I think the best, I think it's an old adage, but it's always going to be true. Safety in numbers, right?
Yep.
So if you're in any kind of a social atmosphere, party, or just a gathering, because so many people say, oh, it's not really a party, we just got together to hang out. But you still have to think. I mean, unfortunately, my friend who happens to be the college professor, she told a story, which I really would love to retell. She mentioned that when she was at a party with several of her female friends, her one friend wanted to separate and be with a guy that she said she's known several times. So she said, really, it's okay, just, you know, I'm just going to go off with her male friend, the guy she was with. And so she told my friend and the other girls, it's okay, I'm fine. And my friend said she had a bad feeling, and they weren't even drinking. And she said she still had a bad feeling leaving her alone, but she said she was good. She had a consensual situation, but she left them alone. All the rest of the girls left her alone, and she came to find out the next day that unfortunately the friend who went off with the man did indeed get raped. So I guess the bottom line goes to stay safe in numbers with a group of friends. Is that also what you educate people on?
Absolutely. We're required under New York law, but we do it. It's called bystander intervention. And we all know it back from the day, watching your friends, watching out, staying safe. We tell our students in orientation, we tell them multiple times. Safety in numbers is one way to look at it, but putting yourself, knowing where you're going, planning where you're going, watching out for your friend. We've all had a situation where maybe a friend's been too tipsy and they're with somebody you've never seen before. Using that gut feeling, that's a great example of saying, it's okay to say, are you okay? You know what, come here, you don't want to do that. One of the things we preach about staying safe is we're all part of the same team. We're all trying to help you. Our faculty are great. They're part of the team. You know, students come to them and talk to them. They encourage our students to come forward. They encourage our students to be really safe about what they're doing. But a lot of it is the same common sense that we would teach our children, but this is on a bigger scale. And how important it is for someone who's coming into college for the first time. They're all excited. They're staying in a dorm. They're going to parties. And they may be missing this. You know, we can tell them lots of stuff when they get here. So our job is to keep reminding them of the training. But bystander intervention is more than just saying, are you okay? It's intervening and getting that person away. Oh, I noticed my friend's about to go in a car with a strange guy. I don't know. Does she want to do that, or does he want to do that? It happens both ways. We tell people, intervene. And if it looks really unsafe, you call the police. If you're not sure, and it's your professor's story is one of many across the country that you've seen, which is, I should have done something.
You don't want the should have feeling.
That you will feel that,
right?
And as a parent and as an individual, you don't want to be there. So better safe than sorry. When you go out, you watch out for each other. You look to see what's going on. You know where you are. If you're at a party with people you've never met before, one of the things we always talk about is don't accept an open drink that you haven't seen poured. That's been going on for years at colleges.
Right. I mean,
the proverbial punch.
Right, the proverbial punch. I mean, they've had so many movies, including Back to the Future, where you see the one person spake the punch. I mean, it's a classic story, but we're talking modern day security. Be smarter than that. Now, I've heard recently, unfortunately, it's something I think sounds crazy, but in today's day of technology and social media, have you heard of something called revenge porn? I think that sounds crazy, but what is revenge porn?
Revenge porn. It's the idea of, and this happens everywhere, not just colleges. It happens to be our young ones are very knowledgeable in the ways of the internet, more so than social media, especially. But we haven't really experienced this, but other colleges have, and certainly other employers have, where someone to get revenge will start posting pictures of you in compromising positions, or even sending porn to your office computer to make it look like you're accessing it. There's no...
But is this something that goes on at college campuses?
I'm sure we haven't seen it.
So you haven't seen it? Okay.
We haven't really seen it, but I know that it's been going on at other places. And right away, when that happens, the person needs to report it. And unfortunately, if it happens, a lot of people don't know that it's revenge porn. They think, this is really weird. I just got pictures of this person. And that's when, college campus safety and you get the police involved, because it goes beyond just I'm trying to embarrass somebody. Talking about people's careers, reputations, social circles.
It's ruined your whole life.
Right.
So I know that your college campus is actually several campuses and is rather large and world-renowned. But what about smaller universities? I actually, unfortunately, was brought to my attention yesterday, getting ready to speak with you about this today, is that unfortunately there has been a story where this girl was raped in a very small town university. And because the perpetrator was so well known, she couldn't find a therapist, she couldn't find the police to prosecute, and ultimately, 6 or 7 months later, I believe it was, she committed suicide. She did not get help anywhere she turned, for therapy, for counseling, and she didn't feel safe leaving her hometown. That's where this perpetrator had such a strong influence. It literally destroyed her life. Do you know of any statistics at all that talk about what the maybe suicide rates or depression rates tied to being a victim can be?
I don't know of those rates, but this story that you're talking about is something that's been going on for hundreds of years. We've tried to eradicate that. You should be, wherever you are, any college, any town, if you are sexually assaulted, you should have the right to go to the police, local authorities, counselors, to be able to tell your story and to get some level of justice. And it's not just about getting justice, it's about making the area safe. If someone's a perpetrator, they're dangerous. They could do it to other people. And for instance, going all the way back to, I hate to use a political figure, but Ted Kennedy on Martha's Vineyard. Today, that could never happen. If that incident occurred, there would be an inquiry and there would be prosecution and all kinds of things. Unfortunately, a young lady died in that situation. And regardless of whatever the details are, people who are rich and powerful or connected shouldn't, and most times are not able to cover up those kind of things. But that's just a real shame.
But what if somebody feels like they're in a very small environment and they just don't get help anywhere they turn? I think that this would be a great time. If you could share with us an idea, if somebody were to see this and they know somebody who's going through this, should they go to a higher level of authorities? Is there a phone number? Nowadays, phones, internet, this shouldn't be happening. What do you suggest?
If it was a college campus, I would say there's the Office of Civil Rights, which enforces these laws. You can do that for free. You could file a complaint. They have jurisdiction over all colleges. If it's any kind of federal authority, there's state police outside of that area. There's also, and having been a practicing lawyer for many years, go to an attorney, find a good attorney who can help you. There are
even if it's out of their immediate area.
Out of the immediate area. There's very knowledgeable attorneys about, you name the area of law, employment law, criminal law, who can help you.
What if they can't afford an attorney?
There's also public aid, and there's clinics at different colleges that can help. There's no shortage of resources if you have access to a computer to get help. And some of the thing is the challenge of, well, no one's going to do anything, and we get that. A lot of colleges do in the campus climate survey. Well, I was going to report it, but I didn't think anybody would do something. We try to change that, as all colleges do. But in the end, the courage that you need to have to do that is tough. But there's so many resources. That young lady, I'm sure a lot of people would have liked to have said, gee, I wish I would have talked to her or said something. Unfortunately, that can be complicated. But that situation, I think we've eradicated a lot of that. It doesn't mean it won't ever happen again. Won't ever happen at any of my campuses, and I know a lot of colleagues that wouldn't let that happen anywhere else.
So one last final thought is, are there any kind of national hotlines, or that just anybody can access that are nationally, because we do air nationally, that someone can call if they feel that they've been a victim and they're just too afraid to tell anybody, because maybe they're just really embarrassed? I've heard of one place called Rachel's Coalition. I don't know if you've heard of that one. Or is there any kind of resource you can mention easily now?
There's several, and that's one of them. AAUW, American Association of University Women, is another one that shares all kinds of resources. Every college, every county has a rape crisis hotline that you could call. Back where we are on our main campus in Dutchess, they are great. They're great supporters. They look at everything as if it's very important. There's no judgment. We act upon it. Most counties have that, and I would say all counties have that. If you're having a problem with you feel local police, I love our law enforcement. I think they're great in this country. If you think you have a perceptual problem, then you go to state police. There's always a higher level you can go.
Keep finding another level to
Find
go
another
to.
level, and this is something that everybody should feel confident that
Great.
if that happens to them, especially young ladies, a level of confidence. There are people out there to help you. I mean, I'm just one person talking about it
Fantastic.
for college campuses, but there's so many advocates and counselors that are out there to help people every day, because this occurs not just on college campuses. This occurs in people's neighborhoods, in cities, in towns, and it's very important.
Joe, this has been very helpful. I think the parents will feel better to know that there's this many laws, regulations, and policies in place to keep their kids safe at college. And remember, this is not something that you just hear about. Statistics are true for a reason. Make sure that you're very comfortable. Research the safety policies of any college you're about to send your child to. And if they're already there, prepare them. Make sure they're outspoken. Encourage them to stay safe in numbers and prevent the crisis. That's how you stop it.